Hello, welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy. Um, so so I didn't post a video last week, and I was kayaking um, off of Vancouver Island. Um, it was lovely. The weather was a bit mixed, which apparently is kind of typical for the Tofino area of Vancouver Island. It's known as the Fog Coast. Um, so it was a 5 day kayaking trip, and the first 2.5 days were kind of rainy, drizzly, gray. I don't have pictures because, pictures of trees and mist, you know, doesn't really capture, anyway. Lots of sea otters and seals and eagles, of course, salmon jumping. It was cute. One night we were camped on a beach, and there was like a family um, from Nanaimo camping on the same beach, and all the kids went out salmon fishing. It was the last day of salmon fishing allowed on the island. Because the salmon are starting to spawn in that area. And so they went out and caught a 16-pound coho, which, I mean, that's a big fish. And so they were like, "Do you want some fish?" And so we said, "Sure." And they gave us half a fish, and there was 8 of us in our group, and we could not eat all the fish that they gave us. Like, anyway, it was delicious, fresh. They were so excited they caught this fish. It was really cute. Kayaking was good, but 10 miles a day, 4 or 5 hours in the boat is uncomfortable when you're not used to it. Uh, so it was good, but it was just like, oh my God, my back, my hips, like, I'm done. After 4 or 5 days, I'm done. The weather ended up being beautiful, and we ended up at Hot Springs Cove. So it was kind of fun to like soak in hot springs, and at the end of several days of paddling. So that was great. Um, my other treat was we took the ferry over to Victoria, and then we had to drive up to Tofino. Um, and so we had a couple hours there of free time, shall we say. And it was lovely. I met Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads in person. So that was such a treat. Um, it was so cute. She met us at the ferry terminal and took us, we were just in time to see the ferry boat ballet in the inner harbor. That was kind of a hoot. I mean, kind of cheesy, and but just like cool, touristy thing to do. But it was fun, and then we went back to Lindy and Laurie's house for some lunch. And of course, Lindy made everything, and it was delicious. If you watch Lindy's channel, you know she cooks a lot, and yeah, delicious. And then we took a walk through the neighborhood. I wanted to see the sights that she talks about in her videos, so we walked on the Galloping Goose Trail, went over the Trestle Bridge, over the gorge. She took us over to her rowing club. So it was a lovely, just a couple of hours with her and Lori. And then Ned and I had to hop in the van and drive to Tofino to head off on our kayaking trip. So anyway, that was our adventures and why I didn't post last week. I think it worked out that the trip was this past week because I missed the Booker long list announcements and everybody's reactions to it. And as a result, I'm kind of not drawn in. What are my thoughts? So, and again, I have not digested, I haven't really looked into the list very much at all. Not surprised to see James on there. I wouldn't be surprised if James won. Wouldn't be surprised if James wins the National Book Award, the Pulitzer Prize. Everyone is touting it as a American classic, even though it was published this year. I will read it at some point, but there's so much hype. I can't do it. And I'd really like to go back and read Percival Everett's backlist. Anyway, I'm excited that it's getting acknowledged, and I think Percival Everett has been sort of an underappreciated American author. So it's kind of fun to see him getting such recognition. So good for him. The other book that was a little surprising was Strange Eventful History by Claire Massoud, which I read in my last, posted about in my last video, which I didn't really get on with that book. And I was very surprised to see it on the long list because I don't think it's a Booker book. Unpopular opinion, perhaps, whatever. That's all I'm going to say about the Booker long list. So I was kayaking and the weather wasn't great. So I was not about to pull out my books from its plastic dry bag and risk things getting wet or damp So I packed sketchbook and materials, didn't sketch, packed book. I did pull it out finally on the last day when it was sunny, and journal. Didn't write in at all because, again, I didn't want it to get wet. So anyway, I was prepared. So before we left on the trip, I finished Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I loved this book. Loved this book. It actually looks quite thin, but it's not. It's 225 pages. So this was a page turner for me. So, Annie Bot, what is this book about? So, Annie is she's known as a snuggle bunny, which is euphemism for she's a sex robot owned by Doug. And she's programmed to please him, obviously sexually, but also in conversation, in how she dresses, keeping clean his apartment, conversation. So she's constantly monitoring his signals for, is he getting annoyed with her? Is he finding her funny? Whatever. Anyway. And she has been his robot for about 3 years. And about a year ago, he changed her programming for her to be autodidact, meaning she can start to teach herself, right? So she can monitor his reactions and then take that feedback and then change her behavior going forward. So Doug also doesn't let her leave the apartment. He allows her to pick out clothes that she wants, but he has to approve them before he buys them for her. He occasionally, as punishment, he'll order her to go lock herself in the closet and, you know, plug herself in and recharge and get in the closet. You know, he'll tell her like it's time to work out. So you can tell that Doug is sort of infuriating. But you know, what's interesting as she starts to learn more, she starts to become more self-aware and more starting to question why she's only pleasing Doug. Why can't she please herself? Why can't she make choices independently? And so she is, in order to please Doug, she wants to be more real, a real human. And of course, as she becomes more real, Doug is less and less happy. So, you know, things with Doug are sort of set up for trouble. This book is described as I saw in a few reviews as being compared to Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which I always described that book as a book about clones, but not really about clones. This is similar in the sense that this is a book about AI or robots, but it's not really about robots and AI. This is really a book about humanity, about love, about you know, ownership, you know, personal agency. I loved it. Like I said, for me, it was a page turner, and I think I read it in like 2 days. Like I just really, really liked it, and I got so mad, so mad at Doug. But I also, you know, there were moments or snippets of conversation, and I was like, oh my God, I've had that conversation. Like, you can't help but recognize aspects of relationships that you've been in watching Doug and Annie. So in that sense, it was a little eye-opening and a little frightening. And you know, of course, your annoyance with Doug grows, but you know, I also found myself continuing to cheer for Annie and sort of wish her the best. Loved it, loved it. So if you're not a sci-fi person, I would still recommend this book because it's not like Never Let Me Go. It's not really about the sci-fi elements. Those are just plot details. It's really about male-female relationships and patriarchy. Read Annabot. I took with me to Vancouver. I wanted to take a Canadian author, and I've had Mary Lawson's Crow Lake on my shelf for eternity. This is at the library. They have like paperbacks that you can just take and then return when you're done. So these are donated books. I collect these and then never actually read them. So probably half the books on my bookshelf are these library books. So I need to do something about that. And anyway, Mary Lawson's Crow Lake. This is a book about 4 siblings, and really is examining the relationship of 2 of them, Kate and Matt. These siblings live together and continue to live together after both their parents are accidentally killed in a car crash. So Matt and Luke are, I don't know, 18, 19 years old when this happens. And then Kate is, I think, 7. And then they have a younger sister, Bo, who I'm guessing is like 2. And Luke, and he decides he's not going to go to college. He's going to stay home, work, and raise these girls. And Matt is sort of really the intellectual in the family, and so he wants Matt to get a scholarship and go to college. This is a dual timeline, and so we see Kate in, modern day. She's a professor of biology, um, and she is in a relationship with another professor, assistant professor at the university, and things sort of reach sort of a crisis for her in the modern timeline when she receives an invitation for her nephew's Simon's 18th birthday, and he is Matt's son. And so she needs to decide whether or not she's taking the boyfriend back to meet the family. And you realize she has a lot of complicated feelings and a lot of guilt around her family that you don't know why. And then you go back in time and see the period um, from immediately after the car crash to when she is leaving for college. So you see her youth, and it explains sort of where the guilt comes from and what happened to these kids and what happened to the relationship between her and Matt. I it was I enjoyed it. It was suspenseful in the sense that Mary Lawson would keep throwing out these nuggets of like, if I only knew then what I know now. I mean, she obviously writes better than that, but that those kinds of sentences that sort of pull you in and keep you turning the pages. Um, it's interesting. Luke and Matt have strong ideas about how they are going to raise the girls and in what their lives should look like. Um, in education is very important in this family. And Luke wants Matt. They don't have really money. So Luke decides to forego college so Matt can go to college. But then Matt is like, you shouldn't do that. So there's tension between them. There's some interesting discussions in here about the meaning of success. What does success look like? Particularly in a family that prizes education when not all members of the family can get educated. So there's a lot in here about family legacy and obligation and sacrifice. What do we owe others? Um, what is the value of formal education versus being self-taught? And there's a lot about the natural world in here. Kate and Matt spend a lot of time at the pond, watching critters. And in fact, Kate, when she becomes a biology professor, this is what she is studying, is freshwater ponds. So it's one of those like quiet gentle books, but there's kind of a lot going on. And like I said, I really enjoyed it. Mary Lawson is a I feel like a well-regarded Canadian author, and this is her debut book. And I really enjoyed it, and I don't think I would have pegged this as a debut um, if I hadn't read that. So I've read now two Mary Lawson books, and I definitely want to keep reading more of her work because I definitely enjoyed both of those books. So I listened to the Whalebone Theater, which is a debut by Joanna Quinn. Um, in contrast to Mary Lawson's Crow Lake, I felt like Whalebone Theater was definitely a debut. um, so what is this book about? Um, so this is another sort of family drama that takes place between the wars at a sort of crumbling family estate in England, and our main character is Christabel, and she has two step siblings, Digby and Florence, who is called Flossie. And probably for about a third of this book is is them growing up, their relationships together, and um, they end up sort of having this feral childhood because it's clear their parents aren't particularly interested in raising them, and so they raise one another essentially. Christabel is the boss. She's always telling the other two what to do. And one day, a whale washes up on the beach, and eventually, when it's down to bones, they move the bones onto the estate and uh, and use it to create their amateur theater. And so they put on these theatrical productions with whatever hangers on are around. So, their parents will be entertaining um, an American heiress. There's a period where there's a Russian painter, his wife and children, and his mistress. You've got the housekeeper and, the maid, um, and they're all in these amateur productions and blah, 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 blah. This was too long. And so, again, this is like a third of the book. And then we suddenly jump to World War II. And Digby joins the army. And Flossie gets left behind at the estate. And she ends up joining the land army. I think that's what it's called, right? All those English girls who are sent out into the countryside to grow vegetables and, tend animals and, it's the land army. Yeah. And then Christabel joins the WAF. And Digby eventually joins the SOE, right? Yeah. And he is trained and sent behind enemy lines to work with the French resistance. And Christabel decides she wants to do the same thing. And so she also ends up joining the SOE. And it's interesting because you follow her through her training, her going behind enemy lines in France, and her various adventures working with the French resistance. Um, and then we get to, I don't, again, I'm not going to say too much about it other than I've read other books that describe the training and sort of being in the resistance and supporting that work and the danger of that. And I thought Joanna Quinn did, a good job. It was suspenseful. It was tense. Like it was as it should have been. And then we get to sort of the end of the war, the invasion of Normandy, and sort of what happens, and the liberation of France, and what Christabel and Digby are doing, and blah blah blah. And then suddenly the war's over, and they go back home, and they start up their theatrical productions again. And the end felt way too rushed. You're supposed to see how their wartime experiences change them, but it felt so rushed, and it felt like that section of the book was too short and got sacrificed to make the beginning of the book of their childhood too long. So that was problematic for me. And also, I think the Whalebone Theater is supposed to be, again, you're supposed to see it, how their functioning as kids in the theater. It sort of prepares them for their military lives, and how the characteristics that they had as kids feed into their military lives. And then I think at the end, when they go back to the theater and you see how their productions change, that's supposed to illustrate how they've changed and been impacted for the war. And that just did not work for me. I just didn't think it worked as a device. And in fact, for me, a lot of the descriptions of the theatrical productions, and they're obsessing over the theater, and this is how we could do, Hamlet in the Whalebone Theater, whatever. The Tempest, I should say. I wasn't interested. I found their military exploits much more interesting and fascinating and interesting. So I think I gave this book a three stars. I feel like it's probably like 3.5. Quinn's writing is good, but to me, there were some issues with this book. But I would definitely be interested in reading one of her books going forward, because I think there's potential. So that's my thoughts there. What am I reading? I also started reading Anne Appelbaum's Red Famine. I've wanted to read Anne Appelbaum's books forever and a day, and I found this signed copy in a used bookstore on my travels. So, great opportunity to finally read one of her books. And then since I just finished listening to the Whalebone Theater, I need to find something else. All of my holds are still on hold, so I need to find something that's immediately available. So that's on my list to do today. Hope you all are doing well. Hope you're all having some summer adventures that include a good book. All right, bye.